Turns out we're not the only ones who are sick of woke culture. Celebrities are growing tired of it as well. Many are starting to speak out. Finally, the ones who are successful and can lose a few jobs, I suppose, due to their political opinions or their criticisms of other people pushing their political opinions. Really, Quentin Tarantino has spoken out against that. We'll also talk about Kevin Sorbo, Sylvester Stallone, Ricky Gervais, and a few other people in this video. But check this out.
Besides the great entertainment, I have always really appreciated the way you pushed back when anyone tried to stifle you, shut you up, shame you, bully you. They tried it with the last one, with Once Upon a Time in the Hollywood, some bullshit about Margot Robbie doesn't have enough lines. And you do what I wish other people would do. Instead of apologizing like a little pussy, you say, I don't agree with your assessment.
If somebody brings up something that actually is legitimate, I'll even have a conversation with them about it because I'm actually into interesting thought, and I don't have to even agree with you. Oh, that's an interesting point.
Right.
That's an interesting point. But there has become a thing that's gone on. It seems like in this, especially this last year, where what's the word I'm looking at? Ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like, ideology trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining.
There's two kinds of movies, virtue signalers and superhero movies.
Yeah.
Are you bullish on the future movies? Because...
Well, look, you have to always look at...
Are we going to get back to that place?
Look, this happened.
What he was talking about earlier is critical theory, isn't it? Like pushing ideology over everything else. That's woke culture. That's what they're pushing in the education system, and it's what they're pushing in Hollywood as well.
It comes in waves. This absolutely comes in waves. All right, so it's like, okay, just looking at the 40s. All right, that was during the wartime, but that's also the time that you had film noir, where you actually, even though with the Hays Code, you had these dark, dark stories that were being told. But then after the war was won, then you had the 50s, which was the first of the completely homogenized decades. You couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful. All right, and every bestseller, every play that was turned into a movie, if there was anything sexual about it or anything about it, that's all going to be drained out of the movie. It's going to be weaned out of the movie. It's just the way it is. And to me, it's one of the worst decades in Hollywood. Is the 50s, and the 60s. Pretty much from like 1960 to 1966 was the 50s part 2. Right. But then what we think of as the 60s starts in about 67, and that's when New Hollywood comes out. Yeah. And that's an absolute positive response to...
That's a great point. I think that we could recover from this and have a lot of great movies in the next decade. Maybe we'll have the best superhero movies since they've been pretty bad since Endgame. Endgame was good, but then the last 5 years or however, I think 5 years since 2019, have not been as good.
The homogenized 50s.
So it's going to come back again.
Okay, and then
I think that's what happened with Westerns. They went downhill for a while, and then we actually got some of the best Westerns in the 90s. Not the hotel, right? I mean, the best movie Westerns. But Quentin Tarantino's pretty interesting. He's made some controversial movies over the years, and he tends to voice his opinion. So, and Kevin Sorbo has obviously been quite critical of woke culture, feminist culture, saying it's time to make Hollywood more manly. He says there's a lack of that in Hollywood. Says it doesn't really matter what end of the masculinity spectrum you fall on. If you're a victim to your own base desires, the feminist culture has won. You're exactly the kind of wussy man they think they want you to be, he wrote. In reality, America today needs warriors, protectors, responsible and committed fathers. We certainly don't need another MCU-esque superhero. I don't know about that. If it's good, it's just the fact that a lot of the movies are bad and they push politics instead of what made them fun to go and see. Anyways, he continues, we need men who will raise their kids, defend their homes, provide for their families, and serve self-sacrificially, all of which is impossible if they are dissipated and addicted to pleasure. Yeah, Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot. It's a sad life to live, hedonist lifestyle where you're only trying to appease your base desires. It's pretty depressing. You want to work towards something bigger than that. Okay, and the great John Cleese has also been quite critical of woke culture. Man, his books are great too, especially if you do the audiobook and listen to him read it. It's quite hilarious. I did that like a year ago for a couple of his books. I highly recommend it. But let's check out what he has to say.
Whenever I'm asked to be interviewed on the BBC, even though it's supposed to be about the mating habits of ring-tailed lemurs, the first question will be, what about cancel culture? Because mentioning cancel culture is the best way of geeing people up, and that guarantees they won't switch channels. Same with the word woke. Most people have little idea what it really means, but despite that, they tend to have strong feelings about it. Very strong. Now, Frank Luntz, my resident pollster, will tell us what people do think it means. Frank?
John, we've been polling on woke for the last 6 months. I've got the data right here on my laptop. Labor supporters are more than twice as likely to identify themselves as being woke than conservatives. But 1/3 of the British population doesn't even know what it is. The data that matters most to me, however, is that 1 out of 4 Brits have stopped talking to someone because they reject their point of view, and 1 out of 5 have had someone do it to them. And if you want to know who those people are, 18 to 29-year-olds. Half of our youngest population have cut someone off simply because they disagree.
And that's a reflection of the public schools. Maybe it's a reflection of people being young, but I think it's a reflection of the public schools pushing those kinds of narratives on people. That's pretty unfortunate. This poll is about the UK, I guess, and not about the US. But it is pretty interesting that that's the case, and it's just unfortunate. But I think that's the result of pushing equity in the education system.
Thanks, Frankie.
All right, so this guy's going to talk a little bit about modern woke culture.
Receiving end of racism. It gives me latitude to kind of satirize what has become known as woke ideology. But you, white,
Right.
heteronormative, from a colonializing nation.
Oh, I'm an imperialist
You
to
go
the
into
core, yeah.
exactly. You go into this terrain with some severe baggage on you. I mean, it's interesting to me that when I look at the trajectory of your career, I've always seen you in your early life. You took, as many great comedians do, you took aim at the power structures
Yes.
of religion and
Yes.
conservative ideology, what you characterize as closed systems of thought. But I think you're right to turn your attention to woke, because it has become a closed system. For me, the fundamental Achilles heel here is not to understand the global context. If you look to other parts of the world, ethnic discrimination is rife.
Right. Everywhere.
Tribal conflict still characterizes much of sub-Saharan Africa, much of the Middle East. So these are two groups that will be fighting with each other because of a different tribal identity. Sometimes this has a different ethnic identity, different linguistic identity. This has been a big problem for humanity since the agricultural revolution.
Yes, racism and prejudice are common, but that really has nothing to do with woke culture. Woke is a narcissistic movement that makes everything about themselves. And a big part of the narrative is for the woke to pretend like they are the only ones in the world who have any sort of empathy. But I'm moving on since this is kind of going all over the place. Here's another one about Sylvester Stallone criticizing woke culture, which he's been doing as of late.
Character pokes fun at the idea of everybody these days having their own pronouns.
What's going on with this country in general nowadays? Does that mean like your generation? Seriously. Come on. And these pronouns. What the is with the pronouns? He, she, him, they, the, boom, bang, bop, bong. Cool. You know what my pronoun is? Yes. Time's up. It. As in it. Can't take this shit.
It's genius because it leaves people with very little to come at him for considering these are just movie characters, but it still allows him to say out loud what he wants to say to his audience. And what makes me respect the man even more is the fact that he's been consistent in his ideals from the very start. in wanting to revive the films of the past that spoke about morality, patriotism, religious values, family, and respect for tradition.
He's bringing back a lot of those 80s movies, 80s action movies, and so on. And a lot of other people are going up against this. The woke dictatorship. Some celebrities go off script and criticize trans community and cancel culture. Carlos Santana, Alice Cooper, Jennifer Aniston are some of the most recent celebrities who have spoken out against woke ideology. Celebrities are increasingly rebelling against woke culture. Some of the most recent stars to speak out against progressive policies and their impact on society are renowned Mexican-American guitarist Carlos Santana and rocker Alice Cooper, who expressed their views specifically against trans people. Santana, for example, made headlines after claiming that, quote, "A woman is a woman and a man is a man. When God made you and me before we came out of the womb, you know who you are and what you are. Later on, when you grow out of it, you see things and you start believing that you could be something that sounds good, but you know it ain't right. Because a woman is a woman and a man is a man. That is, whatever you want to do in the closet, that's your business. I'm okay with that," said Santana. Last night at a concert in New Jersey, rock legend Carlos Santana said, "When God made you and me before we can..." Okay, we just read that. Meanwhile, Alice Cooper also said he doesn't agree with the gender confusion nonsense. He says, "I'm understanding that there are cases of transgender, but I'm afraid that it's also a fad. And I'm afraid there's a lot of people claiming to be this just because they want to be that. I find it wrong when you've got a 6-year-old kid who has no idea." Right? And, adding gender confusion to a plethora of other problems and difficulties in growing up. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Dr. Jordan Peterson's been criticizing that stuff as well. So a lot of these guys have criticized that. Jennifer Aniston says, "I'm so over cancel culture. I probably just got canceled by saying that. I just don't understand what it means. Is there no redemption? I don't know. I don't put everybody in the Harvey Weinstein basket." Yeah, that makes sense. And then you have this article from RT, the top 10 anti-woke celebrities. And I don't know who this first guy is. Gina Carano is, she was popular in Star Wars, and then they found out she's conservative, so she got canceled. That's not really fair, is it? I think it's pretty unfortunate that she was canceled. She's a great actress and a great athlete. Ricky Gervais is probably the most hilarious person on the list. He's really taken Hollywood to task in his hilarious tirades, if you can call them that. His comedy bits, that'd be a better way to say it. He's criticizing those sorts of things, social justice and so on, and which is good. Then we have Matthew McConaughey. So he criticizes that stuff quite a lot as well. Ice Cube, Lauren Fox, Rose McGowan has been quite critical of woke culture. J.K. Rowling has gotten tons of criticism from people, but she's standing up for what's right. I think she's saying women are women and there should only be women in women's sports, right? A woman is a human female. That should be pretty straightforward. And then lastly, we have, of course, Joe Rogan, who's criticized it quite a lot on his podcast and had a lot of people on to criticize it as well, like Abigail Schreier, who wrote Bad Therapy and Irreversible Damage, a couple of great books that you should check out. And they're criticizing a lot of that culture as well. But anyways, we're going to end this right here.